There are more questions than answers. Pictures in my mind that will not show. There are more questions than answers. And the more I find out, the less I know. Yes, the more I find out, the less I know. Now I know there are some questions about the report that some may want answered. Some may have questions about some of the things that were revealed. And there are some things revealed in the report which may have answered some questions that we had in our own minds about Andrew Holness and his business dealings. And so I thought maybe why not just anticipate the questions that you may have and provide you with some answers. Now, I know that one question that must have been burning in everyone's mind is why would Andrew Holness set up a company to hold all his assets, including his house, his stocks and bonds and shares, as well as even his own salary? Why would he do that? It must be a great puzzle to you. And I think I may have some answers for you. And also I made a little discovery along the way while looking up the answers for you. But before I get to the meat of the matter, let me welcome you. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for joining me, keeping me company as usual. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Please subscribe, share, give the video a thumbs up, and you're most welcome to leave your comments in the comment section. To my subscribers and regular viewers, welcome back. Thank you so much for always being there for Jamaica 411. We enjoy your company and also your comments. And of course, you know the ropes, right? You're going to go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. You've been doing very nicely, and I thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts here at Jamaica 411. So go ahead and give the video a thumbs up and share, and then of course you can rejoin me. All right, and of course I thank you in advance. Okay, so now down to business. So why would anybody take up all of them assets and put in a company? What is it all about? Well, this is a normal thing for the knobs in our society. You know what we call knobs, right? Highty-tighty, big shot, big wigs, tapanaris, so many names that we have for them. Yes, this is what they do. Many of them set up companies as holding companies for their assets, and including real estate property. And there are several advantages, one or two disadvantages in doing so. Well, of course, they're not going to do it because there were disadvantages, right? So let me tell you what the advantages are. First of all, if you're looking at the real estate, let's look at real estate. Now, when you're going to purchase a property, you have several costs involved. You have transfer tax, you have stamp duty, you have the registration of the name on the title, and all of those things cost money. And in those days, it used to cost somewhere in the order of about 15%. So you had to find at least 15% deposit. It has been cut down tremendously to maybe about, I think it's probably about 5%, or maybe 7.5%, something to that effect. But it has been cut down. But in those days, it costs money. I mean, 15% of your property is a whole heap of money, that, right? Now, also, every time you transfer the property, this is what you have to do. You have to pay. And it's the vendor, the person who is selling, who actually pays the transfer tax The stamp duty and the registration of the name on the title is shared 50-50 between the vendor and the purchaser. If my memory serves me right, because it's a long time I haven't been in real estate, right? So that's that. Now, when you have a company, the company now, and you have that company's name on the title. Let us say, for argument's sake, Imperium Investments owns the Shenstone property of Andrew Holness, right? On the title, you're going to see as the owner, you're going to see Imperium Investments Holdings Limit. That's what you're going to see. Now, if Andrew Holness decides that, all right, wifey, this house too big for we now, we get old. So let us move out and get something smaller and let's sell this one. In Imperium, he has bonds and stocks and shares and other assets. So what he would do is to transfer those out. And how you would transfer those out now is by changing the name or transferring them to another name, either his name or another company. He would then only leave the real estate property in Beverly Hills in the Imperium Investments. All right. So now let's say you interested and you have the money and you want to buy. What he will do now is simply transfer the shares into your name. Right? So what you'll be buying is the shares of Imperium. So let's say he had, say, 1,000 issued. You just buy the 1,000 shares for, let's say, the property is going for 1 million US. I mean, is a prime minister that, that property when ready to sell, he probably can get 4 million for it US, right? Because everybody going to want to get, and the house was controversial too. Oh my goodness. Everybody who want them wife going to want to buy that property to sit down and boast and tell them one another that this is the prime minister's house, this is Holness' house, and blah, because it has history. So these are the kind of things that add value to our property. But back to the story now. So what he would then do is simply to sign over the shares of $1,000 and you pay your million US to him, right? What is the benefit? The name on the title remains the same. So you don't have to pay that money to change the name, which is what would happen if it was an individual. It would have to change from Andrew Holness to your name. But because it's a company that owns the property, there's no change at all in the name on the title. So you save money right there, so off the bat. Secondly, there is no transfer tax, right? There's no transfer tax to pay. In those days, transfer tax was 7.5%. Remember, right? So you save on registration on the title, you save on transfer tax. The only thing that you pay is stamp duty on the shares that is being transferred to you. And remember, the vendor, the seller, and the buyer, they split the cost 50-50. So let us say the stamp duty was 5%, roughly. Then you pay 2.5%, and the seller pays 2.5%. That is all you pay now. So instead of paying 15% overall, where the vendor paid 7.5% for transfer tax and half of the other taxes. So that's about 12% they pay. You pay about 3% as the purchaser. So the vendor saves a lot by having the company owning the property. You follow now? Now, that was one of the main reasons why people set up holding companies. It's called holding companies, and I'll explain what that is shortly. So that's one of the main reasons why they had their assets, such as a real estate property, being owned by a holding company. Another reason is, think about it. It is so easy to transfer. Somebody come with $1 million, give it to their attorney, who then hand it to your attorney, and all you do is sign over the shares, and that's that. Easy as pie. as opposed to when it's in your own personal name. You have to go wait for titles office now to go and transfer. Sometimes it takes months, depending on how quick the lawyer is, or slowpoke. You have some slowpoke lawyers, right? So it can take a while for it to be transferred. So there's ease of transfer as well as a benefit in having the company owning your real estate property. Also, when it comes to the tax now, the property tax, you're talking about when the property is in your name and you're going to transfer it, you have to sign up some form and go down to the tax office, go sort that out and all that kind of something there. All of that gone because the name on the title is the very same name. All you're doing is just transferring the ownership of the company. You follow? Right. Now, one drawback why some persons can't bother with that is that every year you have to submit what is known as an annual return to the company's office. And that is really no big deal. You're just going to be, telling the company's office who are the directors, the shareholders, and the company secretary, and if you're still at the same address, that's all. So you just sign that up and hand it in, and bam, that's it. If the company is a holding company that's registered abroad, they are required to submit financial statements to the company's office, right? And that's it. You also would need to prepare an annual return also for the tax office. And I do believe it may be a requirement that you have financial statements as well, perhaps for tax purposes and so on. But people who are in business finds it to be, no big deal to do all of these things because that's what they're doing in their companies. Anyway, so these are the main reasons why you find that some persons in the society, the persons who are mostly business people who understand these things, they will purchase real estate properties with holding companies. Now, the question you have in your mind now is, so what the dickens is a holding company? So let's find out now. So according to this website, subaralaw.com, a holding company is a company that does not carry on business. It sells no goods and provides no services. Instead, it typically holds investments such as real estate or shares in public or private companies, or it holds shares in related companies for tax or other planning purposes. So you see what that is. It's a company that does not do any trading. You can't go to the door and ask them to sell you something because it's not for that purpose. So it doesn't do any buying, any selling at all. It doesn't offer any services. It's just there for the purpose of holding the assets, real estate, shares, whether in public or private companies. That's what it does. Now, not only do the holding companies own assets such as real estate, they also have controlling shares in other companies. And when that happens, those companies are called subsidiaries. So for argument's sake, you have companies like ICD, the Matalan companies, and they have other branch companies like Facey. In the past, they had, I don't even know if Facey still exists, but they had Home Electrics, they had Facey, they had Unimotors, and those companies. Those were subsidiaries. And ICD as a holding company is like a parent company. It more or less controls the subsidiaries. All right. Then now you have an advantage in that what they say is that if one of the subsidiaries were to go bankrupt, it would not affect the parent company. So that's one of the advantages in setting up the business this way. All right, so that is it for the holding company. Now you must be wondering, but why are you telling me all these things? You have some reason? Yes, I do. And I want you to pay close attention because in looking up the holding company, I saw a term. And although it's a term that I know before, it was when I saw it used in relation to shareholder. shareholder and beneficial owner. I said, hold on a little. But I thought the shareholder was the beneficial owner. So I decided, wait, if they're using the two terms like that, then maybe beneficial owner means more than just shareholder. So I decided to look it up, and this is what I found out. So it says here, while the shareholder may hold shares in his own name, he may at the same time hold those shares on behalf of another person. You hear that? The shareholder can hold the shares in his own name. So I go and I buy some shares in a company in my name. He may also at the same time hold those shares on behalf of another person. So somebody who does not want their identity to be known for whatever reason, give me the money and ask me to go buy the shares for them. I buy the shares in my name. And I suppose we have some agreement signed where the shares actually belong to them. So I'm only the face on the share and the name on the share, but it belongs to somebody else. This is what is called nominee shareholder. In the case with nominee shareholder, the other person who is the one who gave me the money, who is accordingly the real owner of the shares, is called the beneficial owner. You follow that now? So the beneficial owner is somebody who is behind the scenes, who's behind somebody else who holds the share. So you will see somebody holding X amount of shares. They are not the owners. Somebody else is the owner. And they are more or less shielding that person from view for some strange reason. But aside from a person holding the shares for somebody else, you also have instances where the companies, like for example Barita, if I have some shares that is held by Barita on my behalf, that is also Barita is not the owner. I am the beneficial owner, but it is Barita that is doing the trading for me. So it is perfectly legit in terms of what they are doing is legitimate. It's not illegal in any way. But when it comes to the personal one now, right? You have to ask yourself the question, who would use this facility and why? Well, we will soon find out. So when I realized the difference, this is exactly what it is that we know, but we just didn't know the fancy term for it. So I decided, you know what, let me go back and read what it was that Zara Burton had reported about Tajebe Limited. Tajebe Limited, as you know, is a company that was set up in the British Virgin Islands by Mark Golding and the Tajebe, Tasman, Jessica, Benjamin. That's the first two initials of his three children's name. That's what made up the name of the company. So let us go back now to read what it was that Zara had said at the time and see if we can glean anything from it of interest. So this is Zara Burton's article, which was published October 3, 2023. And the heading is, even as PNP touts opposition leaders' consistent certification by Jamaica's Integrity Commission, doubts arise as to whether Mark Golding declared house in 2021 and before. And this was published by 18 Degrees North Investigations. And you know that is Zara Burton, right? Great. So let us now see what it was that Zara said October 3, 2023 about Mark and that house in Farringdon Drive. She began her report by saying Mark Golding lives on Farringdon Drive in St. Andrew. On government documents, he uses that address. But when it comes to the issue of whether he declared this upscale property on his Integrity Commission filings, Jamaica's opposition leader and president of the People's National Party wrote to 18 Degrees North, "It is not my house." She goes on to say, instead, an entity in the tax haven of the British Virgin Islands, of which he and his wife are the only directors, Tajebe Limited, owns this property in a neighborhood where single-family homes have listed recently at close to 1 million US, which is around 155 million Jamaican. In response to a line of questions in August about his offshore companies that presumed that the Farringdon Drive house was declared, Mr. Golding unexpectedly corrected that presumption, writing, "The real estate referred to in the published summary of my 2021 Integrity Commission filing is other property, either owned by my wife and I jointly or by me individually." That was his response. So, as usual, he puts his foot in it. Having said so, it now caused Zara now to be asking questions as to whether or not he did declare this house. Now, Zara was kind enough to remind us of who Mark Golding is. Very important that we recall that before he came into the Senate, he was a corporate lawyer. So when he used the term beneficial owner or shareholder, he knows the difference between them. When you hear him say beneficial owner, he's not talking about shareholder. When he's talking about shareholder, he's not talking about beneficial owner. A shareholder is somebody who owns the shares in his own name or in the company's name if it's a company that owns the shares. A beneficial owner is somebody who owns shares but through somebody else. You follow? Whether it's a barista or a company buying shares and selling shares on their behalf, or an individual. So that's the difference. So when you hear him use the term, he knows what he's saying, right? So Zara put some questions to him, to which he said in reply, Mr. Golding wrote on August 24 that he and his wife remain the sole directors of Tajebe. You heard that? Remember that now, you know. Him say on August 24 that he and his wife remain the sole directors of Tajebe, and that in mid-2021, after, listen to what I'm saying now, after our children became adults, we transferred 100% ownership of the company to our children. My wife and I are not shareholders in the company. You see the word when used? My wife and I are not shareholders in the company. But in a possible indication as to who has control over Tajebe, this is what Zara is saying. He wrote, we may add our children as directors when they achieve certain personal development milestones. Now, having transferred the 100% of the ownership of Tajebe to his children in mid-2021, according to what Golding told Zara Burton. Having done so, the question we must ask ourselves is, how was he planning to make those children directors when he and his wife already signed over the ownership to them? But before we answer that question, it is important for you to know that one of the responsibilities of the shareholders of a company is to appoint directors. As a matter of fact, it is their responsibilities alone to appoint directors of a company. The only time and the only way that a director can appoint another director is if that is stated in the Articles of Association. It has to be specifically stated in the Articles of Association, and then it has to be approved oftentimes by the shareholders at their meetings. So in the case of Tajebe, where Mark and his wife transferred 100% ownership to the children, if they had both ownership and the beneficial ownership of the shares, they are the ones who could appoint themselves as director. As a matter of fact, they can not only appoint themselves as directors, they can also move a simple resolution to have their appearance removed as directors, and they appoint other persons. They are the shareholders, after all. So for Mark to be saying that he and his wife intend at some future date to add their children as directors, that can only happen in two circumstances. One, that the articles of association of the company gave to the directors the power to appoint new directors. That's one way. The next way it can be done is if the parents retained beneficial ownership of the company. In other words, what they did was to sign over the shares to the children, but they are only holding those shares on behalf of the parents. So the children's name are on the share certificate as shareholders, but behind the scenes is actually the parents that still owns the shares. So the question is, which one is it? Is it the articles of association that gave them that power, or the beneficial ownership of the company gave them that power? I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that it was written into the articles of association of Tajebe. So that gave him the power to do so. But then again, I do believe that he must have retained beneficial ownership of the shares. Why? Because it is unbelievable that he would put his assets, his house, and the 10 million shares that he has in proven management in the hands of his children, because those dividends will be going to those children. Are you understanding me? So I don't believe he handed the full ownership of the shares to those children. What he gave them was the shares, but he and his wife retained the beneficial ownership. Now the question is, why did Mark hand those shares over to his children? I think I know why. Firstly, he did not declare the assets that was owned by the company. If he did, he would have told Zara that off the bat. No, he didn't. He didn't lay it out the way in which Andrew Holness laid out the assets of Imperium or ADMAT, where you see that they own these shares and they own Shenstone and so on and so forth. He didn't do that. He apparently only declared that he had shareholding interest in Tajebe, but not what Tajebe owned. Now, in 2021, his assets were going to be now published. The summaries of it anyway, because he's now leader of the opposition. So here's what I think happened. I believe what Mark did by handing the shares over to his children, but retaining the beneficial ownership, was that he now took those assets out of the purview and the view of the Integrity Commission. He is only required by law to declare his assets, liabilities, and income, as well as the assets, liabilities, and income of his spouse and minor children, which means children who are under the age of 18. But he's not required by law to include in his declarations assets owned by his adult children. You see the break now? Yes, he transferred Tajebe's assets to the children in order to take it out of the scrutiny of the Integrity Commission. And he must have done so for a reason. But I don't know if that reason will help him, because at the end of the day, the Integrity Commission can go back and look at what it was that he had declared if somebody brought this matter to their attention, or they happen to notice finally that he may not have been fulsome in the declaration of his assets. Now, I have been telling you about the ownership of Tajebe of the Farringdon Drive house, as well as the shares in Proven Management, the 10 million shares. But that is only what I know. I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that Tajebe only owns one real estate property in Jamaica. We went and we did a title search, and it only brought up that Tajebe has this one property, which is the one in Farringdon. But that does not mean that it doesn't own shares, stocks, and bonds as well. I only found that it owned the shares of Proven Management. There is the Proven Investments Limited that is situated in St. Lucia. We don't know who owned that. So we do have some questions about why it is that Mark suddenly decided to transfer the shares of Tajebe to his children in 2021. Why? Is there something that he wanted to hide? But who would he have been hiding the assets from? There are only two bodies, the Integrity Commission itself, as well as the Tax Administration Jamaica. Yes, the tax man. But in terms of the Integrity Commission needs to go and look at Tajebe and determine whether or not they were declaring the assets owned by the company or merely the shares that he owns in the company. What was he doing? And now that Tajebe Limited has been transferred to his children, he no longer needs to declare it. You see what is going on here? And if Tajebe controls his stocks and his bonds, the vast majority of them, if that is where his stocks and bonds and shares are held, and other real estate properties that he may own abroad, then by transferring the shares of that company to his children, what he has done is in effect suppressed the true nature of his assets, liabilities, and income. That is what he did. Why? Is it because him don't want the people of jungle know him have a bag of money? And this would be the reason why the Integrity Commission is not looking into it, because they would have realized that that is what is happening, why his income and his assets are so low based upon what people think it ought to be. Another reason for not declaring the assets of Tajebe could well be to avoid or evade paying taxes. Now, tax avoidance is legal. Tax evasion, though, is not legal. It means that he would have been hiding his assets and his income from the taxman here in Jamaica. But we don't know if that is the motivation for what he's doing. The last thing that I think that could be what is motivating his actions would be the fact that he's president of the People's National Party and leader of the opposition. If it is known that he has a whole pile of money, people who would normally donate to the party would decide that they're not going to donate because these boys have money, so let them go and spend the money and run the party, especially like when they fight to get it. Yes, that could well be a motive. So in terms of other questions that you may have, yes, like Andrew Holness, through his company Imperium Investments, which is a holding company, Mark Golding does also operate a holding company. It's known as Tajebe Limited. The difference between the two is in terms of the ownership of the shares. Andrew Holness is in fact a shareholder in Imperium Investments. He owns all the shares in Imperium, while Mark Golding is a beneficial owner of the assets in Tajebe. His children own the shares, but he is a beneficial owner of those shares. And we know that because of some of the things that he said, particularly about this business of his, he and his wife making the children directors. He could only do that with beneficial interest. And even though we gave him the benefit of the doubt that he may have written that into the articles of association, no, he has beneficial ownership of those shares. I mean, to hand over your property where you live with your wife to your children is stupid, right? And as stupid as he is, not even him is that stupid. So no, we don't believe he handed over the full ownership of the shares. He maintained and retained beneficial ownership of those shares. And another difference between a shareholder and a beneficial owner is that the shareholder is known and is upfront. The beneficial owner is in the shadows and in hiding. They are hiding the fact that they own the shares, and that is why they give the shares to somebody else to hold while they actually own the real interest in the shares. Anyway, folks, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving your comments. So until next time, you take good care of yourselves and walk good.